I will be in Poland on a trip with Hasmonean, but enjoying this book so much and our learning together that I decided that I would record this beforehand. So I hope that it's okay and it's understandable, and happy to take any questions on it afterwards if you would like. So we are up to page 103, and really we began this fantastic and fascinating chapter, which is all about Ratzon, which is all about desire, which we said is the inner source, is the makor, the source and the root, the origin of everything that we do as a person, as a human being. In fact, it's the place where all of the inner knowledge is really contained. And if we could distill everything that we do down to that one innermost Ratzon, that one innermost desire, that's passion, that's pushing everything else and driving and directing everything else that we do. And then we said that the concept last week we spoke about of tefillah, of prayer, is in fact one which needs a lot of discussion. There's a lot of questions about prayer. Why do we daven? Surely Hashem knows what we want. Are we changing His mind? If something is good for us, then we should get it. If it is not good for us, then we shouldn't get it. What is this concept of davening? What is it doing? So he began with an answer, which was a beautiful idea, where a person can change himself. When we daven, it's not actually about the request per se, but rather about the fact that this has an impact upon ourselves. And therefore, although if we're a person who wasn't worthy of getting something at the beginning of our tefillah, however, by the time we get to the end, then we could be a person who's a different person. And therefore, we're now worthy of getting something that we were not worthy of receiving beforehand. We continue now at the top of page 103. Before dealing with the other questions we raised, let's focus on the nature of this change. As mentioned earlier, a real change in the personality must be a change in Ratzon, meaning in that inner core of our inner knowledge, there's got to be something there that's changing. Only a change in the root, the tachlis dimension, i.e. the innermost essence, can be considered meaningful. All else is only technical rearranging of the superficial. How does one change one's Ratzon? How does one bring in a new desire? This issue is pivotal. The first phase of tefillah, he says, of davening, is to reach the Ratzon, to ascend in one's consciousness until one penetrates into the very core of one's own personality, to stand facing one's own root desire, that distilled essence from which flows all the rest of one's inner life and outer behavior, and to face it honestly and unafraid, is an absolute requirement for genuine change. This is a very high meditation indeed. All superficial thoughts must be banished, and intense concentration is needed. Now, we had Rabbi Dov Ber Cohen, Lucille's son, who came round for a Shabbos, flew all the way from Israel, joined us for a fantastic, uplifting Shabbos. And he will tell you all about the meditation, especially that which he did in the Far East, which involves sort of 16 hours solid of breathing exercises in order to penetrate into one's innermost being, one's innermost desires. And, the question is, how are we going to manage to do this in a short Shemona Esrei, in a davening, which takes us all of, on a mincha, on a weekday mincha, 15 minutes, on a shacharis, during the weekday, maybe 45 minutes, with, again, that focal point, that Shemona Esrei, the davening, the actual Amida being just a very, very short matter of 5 minutes, possibly. How are we going to manage to do this? And he says the following: far more difficult to understand is when one finally reaches that depth, how is a change made? Meaning, even if we do manage to get there, then how are we going to make a change to that inner Ratzon? How do you create a new desire? How do you sincerely come to want that which is higher, more refined and spiritual if you don't want it up till now? To put this into more mystical terms, you cannot go up outside of yourself and bring down a new desire. The most that can be done, surely, is to experience the root of what you are. But where is that ladder to climb higher? Simply to say that you want something else would be a lie. It must be felt, known more deeply than anything else. And by the way, I think this is one of the most important and fundamental questions that all of us face at one point in our life, which is that we understand and we know who we are and what we're doing. We may see that there are people, that there are things which are above us, which are beyond our comprehension or our understanding or our level of Judaism or our level of observance. But how can we get beyond ourselves? How can I grow beyond the person that I am at the moment and the reality which I suppose limits me at the moment? Because if I'm not able to do that, then I'm always just going to remain the same. I may be a little be able to tweak a little bit here and there, And I may be a better same in some small way, but how am I really going to grow to something which at the moment is beyond me? How am I going to be able to look back in 5 years' time and say, wow, I can't actually believe that I'm here, that I made that jump. I can't believe that I'm able to do the things that I'm doing or enjoying the things that I'm enjoying right now. Let's see what he says. The solution is that one cannot cause a new Ratzon to be manifest. By definition, Ratzon is the root cause and cannot be brought about as a result of some other cause. Put simply, your deepest Ratzon level is you, that cannot be voluntarily changed. Seems to be all over then in that case. But he continues, top of page 104. You cannot do it, but Hashem can. A change of the deepest essence of the self, an elevation of that essence is a gift. We referred to this in another context previously. The climb to the top is the work. Going beyond that top is a gift. It comes from outside of the self. It's a new level, a new sensitivity that is the ultimate gift. That is the answer to prayer. Meaning, there's a mashal that they say about a king who tells all of his servants to run up to the top of the tower, and he says to them, you've got 10 minutes to get up all of the stairs till you get to the top floor. And he says, ready, steady, go. 5 servants set out. They're running up and 10 steps and 20 steps and 30 steps and 40 steps. They get to 100 steps. 7 minutes have passed. There's another 400 steps to go. And they see it's impossible. How are they ever going to get to the top? 4 of them give up. It's impossible. It's futile. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of our exercise, waste of our effort. The one, he says, no. The king wants us to get to the top. The king says we can do it. And I'm going to do my very best. I've got 3 minutes left and I'm going to run. I'm going to run. It keeps going up. Turns around the next corner, finds an elevator, gets into the lift, pushes the top floor, and he makes it within 10 minutes. Similarly with us in life as well. The idea is that there are some things which actually we cannot affect that change ourselves. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if you're doing everything that you need to do, if you're really pushing yourself past your limits, if you're doing absolutely everything to your utmost, then I'm going to give you that elevator. I'm going to give you that lift. That's going to take you up higher than you could have got to yourself. He continues, although one cannot voluntarily create a new desire, there's one thing which can be felt powerfully in a natural way. The desire to change. One can't lie and say, I want this or that more selfless level, but one can say, Hashem, I really do want to have a higher Ratzon. I want to feel a higher desire. I want it. One should pour one's heart out in the request to be elevated. As a teacher of mine used to say in yeshiva, you have to wish, to will, to want. If you can do that, that's a beginning. And that's saying to Hashem, I really want to aspire, and I really want to desire to be higher than I am at the moment. How does one merit this gift? If it comes from above the self, how can one bring it down? The answer is that in order for that shefa, the flow of divine energy, to fill your neshama, one must become a vessel for it. The flow is there. The only question is, where are the vessels? What's the container? Hashem's desire to give is maximal and permanent, but where are we? Let's continue to the next paragraph. What does it mean to become a vessel? How does one do that? To become a container for Hashem's bracha. How exactly is this done? There's a mystical idea that the highest level of the personality is crystal clear and transparent. But the lower self, the ego, clouds it. When one sees a tzaddik, one is perceiving something of Hashem. The limited human dimension has been clarified and the higher reality becomes visible. In fact, the opposite of beauty, ugliness, in Hebrew is ke'or, same root letters as achor, which means opaque. Which means that the more our personality is refined, then the purer and the clearer Hashem's light will shine through it. But if we're obscuring Hashem's light, because it's all about us, it's all about the self, it's all about the ego, then it's ke'or, it's achor, it's opaque, it's something which clouds and which hides. An analogy lies in thought, page 105. Concentration applied to solve a problem does not mean focusing on the solution to the problem. One does not have the solution to focus on. Concentration simply means clearing the mind of extraneous thoughts, keeping the mental noise out of the way, clearing a space in the mind, as it were, and the solution appears by itself. An idea is not created, it appears. In Yiddish, an idea is an Einfeld. It falls in. Of course. We've all had that. It normally comes at a time when it's most inconvenient. For example, you could be standing there davening on Shabbos. Suddenly, the idea or solution to something that's really been bothering you falls in. You have to now remember it till the end of Shabbos. You can't write it down. You can't act upon it. You can't do anything with it. And yet the idea just came, just as it says, it fell in, and Einfeld. The stronger the lower side of the personality, the vested interests, the selfish, the more clouded the Ratzon dimension becomes. All of those things which are egotistical, which are about me, those are the things which obscure my innermost Ratzon. The paradox of spiritual living is that to become greater, more real, one has to give up the lower desires which clamor so aggressively for attention. The greatest man who ever lived, Moshe Rabbeinu, was also the most humble, which is no accident, because being humble was the reason for his greatness. When the self is empty, then Hashem can fill it. Our work is not to cause the light to shine, only to stop obstructing it. To paraphrase the comment of a sage, the world is full of light, we cast the shadows. Or to think about it in another way, neshama shinosata bi tahirahi, as we say every morning, the neshama that a person has is absolutely pure. That's inside each and every one of us. That has an innate and deep and inherent desire to be good, to do good, for truth, for mission, for purpose, and ultimately to closeness to its creator from where it comes. However, all of that can become obscured. It can become obscured in the pursuit of our honor, in the pursuit of wealth, or any of the other things which are all about me, which are all about being egotistical. And therefore, as he says, when we can quieten all of those other things, when we can quieten all the other parts, then that part which is deep within us, or hopefully not too deep, is able to shine. And that's the idea of the Einfeld, the idea that falls in. That's becoming a vessel. Because now I'm a container. Now I'm something that can hold that divine goodness that comes from Hashem. I can, if you like, speak the same language as the spirituality which is out there, which is going to bring bracha to all areas of my life. Because I'm not something which is cloudy. I'm something which is open, which is able to contain, which is transparent, as it were. The Bali Musa say that when you plow a field, you make a furrow, and then the idea is that anything that you put in that furrow, which is going to be covered by the earth, is then going to sprout. The Orchos Tzadikim says that the midah, the character trait of arrogance or gaiva in Hebrew, is a furrow for those bad things, a furrow for bad midas. He says all of the negative character traits that a person can have, and think about any of them, don't think about any people, but think about all those negative character traits that a person can have, whether it's being an angry person, whether it's being a selfish person, whether it's being a lazy person, all of those different things. He says that arrogance is the furrow in which all of them flourish and all of them grow. Anova, which is humility, is the opposite. That is the furrow for good midas. That is where simcha grows. That is where being tov, being a tov ayin, looking good looking with a good eye at other people, that's where that grows. All of these different midas are really sort of contained or encapsulated by the one overarching one, which is why, as he says, Moshe Rabbeinu is the most humble of all people, and for us as well, to be a kli, to be a container which holds bracha, then that's the key. The key is to let go of all of our self-interests, of all of those selfish desires that we have. Page 105, the spiritual path is always a paradox. Real honor finds only those who flee from it. Really flee. He says, a man once complained to the Chazon Ish, he fled from honor all his life and it had still not found him. The Chazon Ish says to him, you've been too busy looking over your shoulder. Meaning the guy was running away from honor and looking over his shoulder, hoping that it would catch him up. Real content is found only in those who are really empty. Put in Ratzon terms, this clarifying process means yielding one's Ratzon to Hashem. It's not about me, my inner will, my inner desires, not in order to satisfy my ego. This is the meaning of Aseh Ritzonecha Ritzono. The Mishnah Megillah says, make your will like his will. Give up your will so that you want what Hashem wants, which doesn't mean becoming passive or lifeless. On the contrary, one must passionately want what Hashem wants. Page 106. This level is given as a gift to the degree that one gains control over one's own negative drives and interests. Meaning once one is in control of their negativity, then Hashem can give us that level, that upper, that higher level of Ratzon. So the meditation of the work of tefillah, of davening, is to identify one's deepest core and then to yield it. In effect, one is saying, Hashem, this is who I am. This is everything that I am. All meaning in my life is concentrated here in my deepest desire. Take it, Hashem, and do with it as you see fit. I give myself to you. Actually, this is the secret of Torah living in general. And in Tefillah, it is made explicit. The paradox of davening, which requires the most work, is yielding our Ratzon, our will, and simultaneously building Ratzon, building will. One controls one's own desires until they are not felt, and then concentrates on amplifying the higher Ratzon which results. Yet at the same time, one allows one's desires to be richly felt and then sublimates them into the service of Hashem. Meaning, we're not talking about becoming an automaton. We're not talking about a person who has got no will to live or to grow or to aspire or anything else. On the contrary, we're talking about a fully functioning, healthy, vibrant personality. But within that, it's a person who's able to analyze, to yield, to work on oneself and say, that desire that I want, is that really in line with what Hashem wants? Is that anything to do with myself, my own ego? Or is that actually going to benefit the whole of humankind and the entire world? He continues, this explains too why our tefillahs, our davening, are composed of requests, desires which are expressed, because this is the medium of prayer. Prayer is the work of changing desires. The work of prayer is work on our Ratzon, on our will. Nefesh HaChaim explains, we phrase our prayers as requests because we're working on our Ratzon. But when we ask for all the things which we mentioned in the davening, we should be asking for those things for Hashem, not for us. Meaning, why am I asking for those things? It should be because I realize it's not just good for me, but it's good for me as a person who wants to do Hashem's will. We use our desire for Him. Give us wisdom, but not for ourselves, for your service, Hashem. Give us health so we can perform your mitzvahs and so on. A remarkable exercise of self-development using our potentially selfish motivations to sublimate those very motivations to a higher purpose. Of course, some thought will show that it has to be this way, standing before Hashem with a list of personal requests for completely selfish reasons would be a chutzpah, because that is in no way service of Hashem. So therefore, to sum up, what he said is that the work of tefillah, davening, is something which should change us. How does one change their innermost core, their innermost Ratzon? The idea and the concept is that we can't do it all on our own. We need siyata dishma. We need help from Hashem in order to do that. How do we get that help from Hashem? By expressing in our davening our sincere desire and our wishes and our will in order to grow, in order to come closer to Him, in order that all of those requests that we have whilst we are davening should be things that will further His will. And therefore, by making our will into His will, Hashem says to us, you're now a container which can contain all of that goodness, all of the shefa, all of the bracha, all of the blessing. And that's how things will start to change in our lives for the better. I'm going to end there, top of page 107, and wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbos from afar.